Oh, wait, good, great.
You have a lot of for Sunday afternoon. I'm really thankful that you're making this a priority. Today's meeting, we're gonna just roll right into it right away. We're generally talking about public safety. There's kind of three different topics that we're gonna go through. The first one is just a little bit about the history of history of policing in Thurston County. The second one will be about SROs, and the third is about the public safety tax. It's on the ballot in November. That's new. Okay. And the way we're gonna do this is we're gonna let different persons sort of kick off the conversation, but everyone in the room is welcome to be part of the conversation. They're just the person starting the topic, okay? Any questions from anybody before we get started? Okay, so the first person is Leslie Cushman, introducing the topic of the history of policing in Thurston County.
Hey, can you hear me? Okay, so I'm Leslie Cushman. I've have been working in the police accountability area for a number of years. I worked on Initiative 940. I was a citizen sponsor of that and did a lot of work on that. I'm a member of the Washington Coalition for Police Accountability. We're a statewide organization that works on issues to reduce police violence and increase police accountability. In Thurston County, in particular, we have an elected sheriff, and then we have the municipalities have police chiefs. And those are very different ways of, those are two different things. If you are an elected sheriff, you are a constitutional office. So the state constitution sets out the sheriffs. If you're a police chief, you're appointed by your either city manager or mayor or city council, depending on your governance. And so Olympia, Tumwater, Lacey, Tenino, and Yelm have police chiefs, and they're not elected, but they are accountable to elected officials. And if there's a town like Yokota, they probably have an intergovernmental agreement for the provision of law enforcement services. So when we use the phrase public service, public safety is different than law enforcement. Public safety often includes emergency response and other issues, and then we can talk about alternatives to law enforcement, which are mental health resources, crisis intervention, and the crisis response unit that we have here in Olympia that I'm quite disappointed in, and I'll tell you why. So if we're thinking about the history of policing in Thurston County, it just looks like the history of policing everywhere. It's based on the legacy of slave patrols. That's where policing comes from protecting status quo. And so over the years, the public has tried to bring so citizen activists, community activists. I don't like using the word citizen, and there I used it because it excludes people. So community activists have been bringing, lifting up different values in the law enforcement space. And after Initiative 940 was enacted, so after George Floyd was killed, and after the death of Manny Ellis in Tacoma, the legislature enacted 14 policing bills in the 2021 legislative session. 14 is a shitload of legislation. It takes years to get one policing bill passed. So those 14 to me sent the message that police were basically unregulated in this state, or self-regulated before 2021. And there has been tremendous pushback from law enforcement in this county and statewide. They have a statewide association called the Washington Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs. They have pushed back against those reforms, and their agenda this year is to further push back against the vehicular pursuit law, right? Minimize any. There was one of the bills passed in 2021 was putting constitutional standards up for interrogation of youth and juveniles, requiring that they have an attorney and access to an attorney. The police don't like that, and the Washington Association of Police Chiefs and Sheriffs is going to try to roll that back. So those are things to watch for. So, I think to be an engaged community, we have to, be very watchful of, all of our policing agencies. I think we have to watch our elected sheriff and whether he is interested in the rhetoric around being a constitutional sheriff. The CSPOA is the Constitutional Sheriffs of Police of America. It is an extremist group. There are 3 or 4 sheriffs in the state who belong to it. And I received a call this week from someone watching at a national level saying they're worried about Sheriff Sanders. Now, I haven't seen anything from Sheriff Sanders in this area, whether he's interested in this constitutional sheriff idea, but I'm gonna go have a meeting with him.
Yes.
And they tell me about this. So constitutional sheriffs believe that the elected sheriff is the supreme law of the land, not your congressperson, not the president, not a court, but the elected sheriff. So, and, they're big movement for constitutional sheriffs. So, we'll always have a lookout for that. We worry about the local police and sheriffs, whether they're fully implementing the 2021 legislation, or whether they are slow walking it or actively working to undermine it. So those are sort of issues that we're looking at for the state. When we're done with the rest of this, I can tell you what is going to happen, what's going to be before the 2024 legislation for the community. 2024 legislation for the community, but I'll pass this on. Unless you guys want any questions or anything. And am I yelling enough? Okay.
Does anyone have a comment or question to add to the conversation?
Okay. Who's next?
Okay, yeah. So our next guest is Jillian Gabbard. They spoke before the Olympia School District School Board when the conversation around SROs was at its hottest, and they spoke very well. And so we invited them to come present it better than any adult could. This is a student in the school. This is how they feel about it. This is a student of color. Maybe we should pay attention to them.
Thank you. I'm Julian Gabbard. I run a local student organization with Football HOSD. We're a student youth group that are trying to get students into ethical organizing and anarchism. We have a zine. We primarily focus on leftist education. We also co-founded the leftist student union at Monson High School with my friend Davis over here. And recently, as we all know, there have been a lot of talks about school resource officers in our schools, or should I really say my schools, because I am like one of the students. And a lot of people in this conversation are adults who will majorly be unaffected by the policies that will ensue with this conversation about school resource officers. I've been really worried about the lack of student input that has been asked for. Seems like a lot of community talk when the community will not be the ones who have to walk the halls with these people every single day and will not experience any disproportionate effects unless I don't know. There's no one less really. Students are going to be the ones who are going to have to face the one side of this bill. So that's what I'm here to talk about. School resource officers, there's no studies that have confirmed that they actually provide any sort of safety or anything that you'd expect a school resource officer's effects to have. Actually, they disproportionately affect marginalized students and students of color, which is extremely worrying when I am a student of color. And should also worry a lot of my white counterparts too, because with this, the passing of this bill is going to mean a lot of things. It's going to mean a lot of things to their friends, their families, their community, because their community also has students of color in their community. And so we really need to uplift those voices. But to get into the part of it, School resource officers, like I said, have no statistical research backing them. And yet, local conservative parents and Sheriff Sanders um, have been trying to support these bills. And I find it pretty ridiculous that a sheriff, especially a constitutional sheriff, would have the audacity to come into our schools and tell us what to do, and we must have cops in our schools, especially when there's been no research into alternative effects or alternative solutions to the issues that we face today. I understand that a lot of people in our community are extremely worried, very worried actually, about the safety of their children in our schools, especially with the rise in gun violence in America. But this unfortunate situation is not because there hasn't school resource officers in schools. It's because of the rising mental health crisis among youth and suicide and all these effects, including poverty and lack to resources for mental health, that have affected the Olympia School District and school districts, honestly, across the country. Um, it seems like this push for school resource officers has been primarily out of emotion and not actually a look into the facts behind it. Because once I get into the facts behind it, and these people would have made a complete, 180 and actually have seen that there is, again, as I repeated, no statistical research for school resource officers in our schools. Um, I was extremely disappointed with the board voting yes on this bill to put this new security bill. Um, I think that it shows a very blatant disregard for both facts and the marginalized students in their community. Um, and I think that a school board that isn't looking at the actual statistics and the evidence and the empiricalness of, the fact that school resource officers do nothing, I think that really shows that we need to do much, much better for both our kids and our community. Because if we're just going to go with solutions that will like please fears instead of actually stop the source of violence in our community, so it's not going to stop the source of violence in our community. We will continue to see school shootings, and we will continue to see dead children in the news, and we will continue to see dead teachers until we actually have a good plan that is statistically backed and is not an operation of emotions, which we have seen in the Olympia School District. Um, I really, really do hope, and I implore a lot of you to look into the statistics behind school resource officers and their effects in other districts. Um, because this won't only affect Black students or students of color, it will also heavily affect disabled students, especially those in special ed, because we've seen a lot of incidents with school resource officers, even just in general, police officers and people involved in mental crises, whether it's a result of drugs or mental illness or a condition, they don't respond to those well. And if they can't even respond to these situations in the streets, why would you want them to respond to the situations with your children? Um, we've seen what they do to people going through mental health crises in the streets. We've seen what they did to Timothy Green. They murdered him. They have no actual like way of dealing with this. So why are we putting this problem on to the cops? Really, like I said, we really need mental health resources in our schools, and that should be the focus. And I think that this focus on school resource officers is a dangerous attempt at police fears, like I said. Um, and I believe that a lot more student voices should be heard regarding this. I've talked to a lot of great students who have a lot of great input, and their voices are not being heard. Their voices are being pushed aside in favor of conservative candidates like Frank Derringer or Sheriff Sanders. Both of these people are not students. They, again, like I repeated, will not face the blunt side of this policy. Um, so I think a lot of the community really needs to analyze that and see that, because that is what we're lacking currently. Um, But yeah. Thank you.
All right, I know there's a lot of passion on this topic, so who wants to speak next?
I have a question for Julian. Julian, and I'm sorry if you covered it, but do you feel safe in your school? And if you do not, what would make you feel safe in your school?
Um, I myself, okay. So for the past 2 years, I've been going to Capitol High School. I was in the Black Student Union at Capitol High School. I led both of the walkouts that happened at Capitol High School that reached the news. Um, and in Capitol High School, I can say I definitely did not feel safe with the like nearly constant lockdowns, gun threats, bomb threats, and oh, did you hear about this kid? He brought a gun to school, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, this is a place that I came to learn to better my future, to ensure that I can get a good job, a good education. Why am I being faced with gun threats and bomb threats when I'm just trying to attend a public school and when you're watching it? I think that a lot of students don't feel safe. Um, and like I said, this issue needs to be solved with actual rational solutions. Um, I recently transferred to Avanti High School, and while of course no school is safe from school shootings, I do think that Avanti's approach to dealing with students in simulations is a better way. It's not a good way, but it's better because what students really need when they're going through this crisis phase and they think that shooting up school or killing themselves is the best option is they need community and they need support and recognition of them as a person and they need help. So I think Avanti's way of the small community and making sure that each student like has something to fall back on um, is a better way. So I feel safer there. But overall, I would say no, I do not feel safe in this district. And I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And I think a lot of students have also come to realize that they do not feel safe in our school. I think there was another question that we have. There's definitely.
Also for Solana to talk about.
Thank you. Thank you, Julian and Leslie, for just speaking truth to this issue. My name is Talana Reed, and I am currently on the Olympus School Board serving in District 2. And exactly what Julian said is exactly what the folks needed to hear. The issue about safety is pretty subjective in the school district. First and foremost, certain groups are impacted by different things differently. And, you know, it's not just our conservative parents that are that are asking for school resource officers. The rest of the school board has confirmed and said that they are in support of reinstating them, with the exception of myself. And again, like Julian said, and I was so grateful to hear them say that the people who are impacted by these decisions are not the majority. I'm directly impacted by police violence. My kids are subjected to harassment by the police, and you know the rest of the folks who are making these decisions, they're not going to have the same interactions with law enforcement. And so it's easy for them one day to say, "Oh, I don't support them," the next day to say, "Oh, I support them," and that's not okay. We need education around this. We need to talk about what safety is. What safety concerns do people really have? I mean, that's the question I want to know. And I believe that our students, especially students, Black students, Asian Pacific Islander students, and students with disabilities are disproportionately disciplined in our district as it is. And the district won't acknowledge that there's an issue and a problem. If we can't acknowledge that with discipline rates, we will not acknowledge that when there is biased policing in our schools. Just like the city of Olympia won't acknowledge it with the murders of Timothy Green, the near assassination of Andre Bryson, the murder of my aunt, so on and so on. There has to be an acknowledgement of it. Like I said, the discipline rates are out of control, and again, they're impacting students who don't have a voice. Like Julian said, we don't hear from students. I mean, I appreciate our parents. I appreciate the adults who show up. I mean, I'd like to hear that feedback, but we need to hear from students. And so I'm part of the community advisory committee that's being put together, and I will be selecting myself and Director Clifton will be selecting the folks who are going to be on the committee discussing as school resource officers. And then at the end of the day, what do people really want? What are they saying they want? They want armed police officers in our schools. Again, is that the answer to ensuring that all students feel safe? No. Having armed officers will not do that for all students. And again, how are we going to pay for this? How are we going to manage it? All that has to be talked about before we even discuss bringing them in our schools, not to mention the training that they need to undergo. And we're talking about the same police department who murdered Timothy Green a year ago, unarmed Black man in a mental health crisis who is not a threat whatsoever. And they haven't acknowledged that, but we want the same police department to come into our schools and expect to be accountable? Not okay. We're not ready. We're not there yet. We're not ready for that. What I feel is important based upon what I've heard from students and families impacted by, biased policing, by just different things, is they need support services. They need support to deal with the trauma that they're going through. And this entire country was traumatized. In 2019, 2020, when the uprisings were happening, we were all traumatized. Even if you've never experienced police violence in your life, when we saw all those killings and shootings of innocent people, Black people, we were all traumatized. We haven't healed from that yet. And we're not ready. And so we need to deal with that trauma and then deal with the reality of armed police officers will not prevent school shootings. They won't prevent it. It's the response to those acts of the violence and the threats. What are we doing about bullying? Why are kids bringing guns to school in the first place? Why are, not that it's okay to bring a gun to school, it is not. But why, what is precipitating all this? And that we will hear from voices, and I'll say it, voters are the adults, and, they will be casting votes, but man, I wish we can give kids ballots under 18, because, they're speaking truth. But anyway, I hear you, Julian, and I promise there will be student voice.
Definitely had a question.
Well, first, Julian, I want to thank you for your leadership and courage in this space. You're fighting a fight that you shouldn't have to, your fellow students shouldn't have to, the adults in this community should be coming to the table, and we've been showing you for several years that we're not. And so I just want to acknowledge your leadership because you're amazing, and you deserve better in this community. And Solana, I want to say that watching 3 hours of you negotiating amendments to that policy was the most powerful principled policy development that I have ever seen, and you are an absolute treasure to this community. So that has to be said about both of you. We've got two incredible leaders on this panel today. I want to add a nuance to what Solana was talking about with the fact that OPD murdered a Black man in mental health crisis. The other loudest voice in this community in support of SROs in schools is Sheriff Sanders, who just this past week endorsed the candidate that Julian was mentioning, Frank DeRocher, who has attended and actually campaigned at an anti-trans event against 5599 earlier this year. So Sheriff Sanders endorsed that candidate this past week. Ended up retracting his endorsement, but allowed that candidate to carry his voice for him for nearly 3-4 days. and still has not addressed to this community how impactful it is to marginalized communities. Frank DeRocher has been going to school board meetings for a while now, has said made some statements that are frankly racist. There's no other way to frame it. Has attended anti-trans events, has intimidated a student rep on the school board. And so he was able to retract this statement, very much still in a pro SRO stance, without addressing the harm that he caused to particularly youth people's intersectional identities, our Black queer youth. And so it's pretty startling to me that as leaders in the community, we're not doing more to hold the sheriff accountable for that decision to support that candidate. And so when we think about the leaders in this community who are advocating for SROs in schools, they're certainly not looking out for the best interest of our students. And it falls on all of us in this room, every single one of us, to hold them accountable.
Hi, thanks to all of you. I'm so happy that your voices are going to get out there. We're going to post this video. We're going to be promoting it. So it's not just the few people in this room that are going to hear this message. Talana, you mentioned we wish we could give youth ballots. I'm right there with you. And I'm wondering on that note, has anybody actually polled students, particularly high school students, about how, I hear from the pro SRO parents, like my kids don't feel safe, but has anybody actually asked the students as a whole?
So part of this committee, when I was asked to kind of sponsor it, part of it is staying out a student survey that all students can respond to. Because what happens normally in the school district, only a certain group of students get the surveys. So my directive to the superintendent was to create a survey that every single student will take during school. So if it's first period at the high schools and middle schools, that's when you do it. I don't think we should even exclude elementary students. The problem is, do they understand what's going on, right? And I'm not minimizing their level of intellect, but we need to educate the students too. And so that is supposed to be happening. And I gotta follow up with the superintendent because we're going to start this process really soon. But I want to hear those voices. And the questions are simple. Do you support school resource officers in schools? And a lot of the responses that we have gotten, a lot of the students don't know what an SRO is. So, and that is why it's so important for the district, the school board in particular, to figure out what do we want safe, what do we mean when we say safety? Now, they've taken the rest of the board has all agreed that take the police out of the policy, the word police, but call a spade a spade. What are we trying to keep safe? Who are we trying to keep safe? What does that look like? And we need to explain it to our students so they can make a fair assessment of whether or not they support school resource officers in schools. And also, a lot of students don't have that experience with officers in schools and don't really know. And that's fair too. That's totally understand. That's fair. But you want to hear from the students who have had negative experiences. Real quickly, when my kids were in school at Olympia High School, I'd walk into the school and lo and behold, I'd go through the school. Here comes the police officer right behind me. Where's this woman going? I just know. But also, and I say that because my students who are biracial would walk through the halls, same thing would happen to them. They constantly came home and said, Mom, the cop followed us to the bathroom, to the lunchroom, to wherever, and it seems very minimal and trivial. But when students are there to get an education, that's harassment. That does not make for an enjoyable school experience, not to mention the message you're sending to the other students and staff about racial profiling.
I would also like to add, during my, not elementary school, middle school years, I lived in Everett, Washington, and I attended North Middle School there, and they had school resource officers. I was in 6th grade, and they made me feel incredibly unsafe, having them walk around and seeing a cop with a gun walking around just with kids who are just playing softball or something, sitting there with a gun on his hip, just sitting there and watching the students. It's bizarre, really, that this is what our world has come to, really. And it sets a very just dangerous precedent to our students that like this is just how it is. Like you have to have a cop with a gun sitting at the corner of your basketball court to be safe and to experience safety. And I think that's ridiculous. Um, I think that every student should be able to feel safe, and I don't think they should have to have a gun when they're older or have to have a cop with a gun when they're younger to feel safe in this country, and especially within our district and within our schools. I think that's ridiculous, and the source of this issue actually needs to be addressed, and it can't be addressed by the cop with a gun because that's just a safeguard against an incident, and it's not actually solving the incident itself.
I guess I'd like to add that it shows the power of the narrative. That, and we're gonna talk about it with the tax, the public safety tax, that police keep us safe. The question, do they keep us safe? Of course they don't keep us safe. And we keep us safe. The community keeps us safe. And when you talked about relationships, relationships keep us safe. And when you are budgeting and allocating money for, and first off, this ridiculous phrase, school resource officer. It's a pure, it's like double talk, right? What it is a police officer.
Oh,
It's a
it's a
uniformed commissioned police officer with the authority to arrest, detain, use deadly force, use physical force, and they will be trained like all other
Right.
uniformed police officers. So it is I was so dismayed to hear that the Olympia School Board made this decision because they drank the Kool-Aid.
Yep.
They didn't they know there aren't any facts because they couldn't have brought facts forward because there aren't any facts.
They even said they were.
Yeah, so they, it's, disappointment in their decision-making process. And, when police have discretion, and I think school resource officers have discretion, then they necessarily make biased decisions. That's just what happens with racial disparities and, making decisions that harm queer youth, youth of color, youth with disabilities.
Yep.
So that's gonna be the outcome, and I didn't know about this advisory committee as part of the resolution. So,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I'll need to learn more about that. But the narrative is so strong, and to push back against the narrative that, Sheriff Sanders, all the police chiefs, all law enforcement, have this narrative that police can bring safety to you, and they can be part of building community. They, I heard a, law enforcement leadership say once they supported police in schools because it builds a positive image of police. And, so it's like grooming, right? It's some grooming technique. Anyway, I am very supportive of what I'm hearing here. There isn't any data. When we talk about the public safety tax, one of the bullets that Sheriff Sanders is saying is that we don't meet the, we're 38 out of 39 counties in staffing ratio. And there is no support that there is a certain number of police per population. That's debunked. That's not how you create your staffing and your budget. It's on your needs of your community. You can talk about response times, you can talk about if you need a detective, but it's not about numbers.
Right.
It's not one size fits all. And if people are interested, I can send you public professional HR policing resources that have said, you don't use that ratio anymore. It doesn't work. So when it's a fallback, it's part of the narrative.
Thank you for that.
I would also like to add, I would especially like to harp on the topic that was talked about earlier about the board voting yes on this bill, drinking the Kool-Aid, because seriously, it was an absolute show of just miscare of their students, and I found it disgusting. Like, especially with Maria Flores' vote, that really, really confused me. I understand that was a very emotional and vulnerable moment, and I'm not going to harp on that. But I think that if you were going to vote no at the beginning of the night, and then you experience these emotions from both the parents and your own personal experiences, I believe that you must realize that you're operating in your emotional mindset and that you need to take a step back and look at the facts. And I think every single board member should look at the facts and respond as to why they even said yes, because there's no evidence. In fact, the superintendent, Patrick Murphy, said there is no evidence, blah, blah, blah. We're going to vote yes. And to sit there as one of the only Black people in the room, I was just like, what is going on? Because that is a absolutely ridiculous notion that you can sit there and disregard the facts as you are saying them and then vote yes on a bill that will disproportionately affect marginalized students. It was absolutely disgusting. I was so enraged that I literally almost started like angry crying outside of the building. Like it was just a blatant disregard. It was absolutely disgusting. And like I said, I think every board member, I don't think they should be required to or something. Well, okay, everybody, maybe but Tawana's given her explanations, but everybody needs to explain why they voted yes that night, including the superintendent. I found it extremely ridiculous. It was an absolute miscare of students.
There's just one piece I want to add to the conversation. Um, it is not quite right that there is no data that says SROs don't make anybody safer. There is data. The data says that SROs make marginalized students less safe, period. That's what the data says. So I want us to be really, because that's a really important piece. If there's no harm and there's no benefit, then we got to talk about why we're doing it. But then you can sort of justify shrugging your shoulders. But no, the data says SROs harm marginalized students, period. So what's happening is a bunch of parents are coming in because they're afraid for their kid, which is a reasonable thing, right? There was a gun in your kid's school, you're going to be afraid for a bit. That's going to happen. That is completely valid. They're coming in with that emotion. The school board needs to understand where that emotion is coming from and understand what they're asking for. The parents, they're saying the words SRO because they don't know what else to say. There's nothing else in their tool belt. They're desperately reaching out for something to make themselves and their kids feel safer. So that's why they're saying SROs. That's why that's an emotional response of these SROs getting put back in our schools. We need to come up with other solutions, and we need to be crystal clear that that path doesn't actually make your kids safer. And that's a huge education problem that we have to keep saying over and over and over again. And not only that, but it comes at the expense of marginalized students. You're choosing something as a parent who's advocating for SROs. You're choosing something to try to make yourself feel a little bit safer, knowing, hopefully, that it's going to hurt kids. They're not your kids, so somehow that's okay. No, it's not okay.
So I want to explain real quick what happened on September 14th at the school board meeting. So the night before, our superintendent and our school board president had basically a press release to the public in response to the student bringing a gun to school at Capitol High School. And when none of the other board members were part of that press release or press conference, but I mean, I channeled in just like everybody else, and I heard the board president and superintendent say, we are reinstating SROs. I said, no, we're not. I mean, we have to vote on this. It's not something you just arbitrarily do. And so they called for a special meeting the following day so we could talk about it. And when I went into that meeting, I personally thought we were going to be voting whether or not SROs would be reinstated or that they arbitrarily made that decision. And when we got there, it was to vote on the policy that allowed for an MOU, a memorandum of understanding to, be drafted with the police department and the Olympia School Board. But, based upon the previous, policy 4311, it didn't have very many provisions in it. Basically, the superintendent could just go get a contract going, bring it back to the board approve it, kind of rubber stamp it. And so that day we got, so that on September 14th, we got a school board meeting. I very firmly stated my position. I do not support our police officers in our schools. And I did not support that policy 4311 as it stood because it had very limited provisions in it to protect our students. For example, so we made several amendments that night, to this, and again, this policy 4311 does not allow for, school resource officers to be with schools because I added an amendment, the board must approve that first. As a board, the superintendent has to come to the board and say, we want SROs in school and present it to us, and we have to take a public vote on it. And so now that's in that policy, he just can't arbitrarily do it. In the meantime, there are some things that we added, for example, that police officers have to document every interaction with students if it was to happen, or any safety officer. It doesn't have to be a police officer that they use, because again, there are alternatives to police officers in schools. Mental health professionals, crisis response units, just different things. So whatever that safety looked like, everybody has to follow these parameters. Some of the other ones were that the board had to approve it, that there was a board member had to be a part of the conversation with the city and the negotiations, so that we can, is we as board members, we are advocates for the students. I don't work for the institution of education. I do not advocate for, OSPI or the school district. I advocate for students and families. So I thought that it was important that a school board member be a part of that conversation and that dialogue. And then and that did get voted for, and just some other things basically. So so that's what happened that night. And I'm telling you now, there cannot be police officers in schools without, or even any kind of safety program initiated without the board voting on it. And that's part of the major problem is responses. That night at the school board meeting, every single person that stated their position, because I kicked off the conversation with stating my position that I don't support police officers, and the rest of the board shared theirs, and they were all in support. They reluctantly support this. They cautiously support this. It's so confusing to the public. Yet you're the same board that 2 years ago voted that they're not in schools. Nothing has changed. Let's get away from the emotions, get away from the opinions. Opinions are not based on facts, and they share their opinions. And despite the fact that there is evidence in our own district, let's not even talk about national data. Let's talk about our own district where this student says they do not feel safe in schools with police officers. That is data. Other data is our disproportionate numbers in discipline with just students with disabilities and Black students and Pacific Islander students. We cannot, if the board is not willing to, again, acknowledge those issues, there is no way in hell they're ready to put armed police officers in school. So that's what happened that night. And then we do have the community engagement.
Do you remember how much time is left for someone to apply?
You have until tonight, I think. Go to OSD, maybe tonight or tomorrow night, go to the district website and you'll see school safety CAC. And then and you can still apply to the other. Students too, all students. We're gonna have 10 students.
Well, it seems to me that what the school board was really, where they're really coming from is that they understand the evidence that really supports them. But because these people are saying will feel safer, they're consciously willing to make a decision to sacrifice the interest of minority students.
If there was no opposition.
In order to make this other group of people feel safer. That really seems like what their underlying reasoning is here. Do you agree with that?
Oh, I do. And if there was no opposition, i.e. me and, students speaking up, they would probably be a little further along the process if there was no opposition.
Right. And then another point is that I am a teacher in school. I've been a teacher for 20 years. I work in an alternative school. We get a lot of students coming down from our main high school. you know, I'm always curious, like, what brought them there, what their story is. Never once have I had a kid come up from the main high school telling me, oh, I'm afraid because of a shooter or a gun at school. But I hear a lot that kids are being bullied and harassed, you know, and that they can't take it anymore. And they stopped going to school, their attendance was terrible, and they eventually made their way to the alternative school, where we're much smaller classes, better relationships with staff. I'm proud to say that at our school, I think there's virtually no bullying and harassment. Occasionally a little bit, we know our students really well, classes are small, we're really tight culture. Anything happens, we know it. So it's based on that safety of relationships, that safety of community, knowing where kids are at. So to me, that's the real problem going on in our schools in terms of safety, is bullying and harassment. It's a huge problem in our public school system. And some kids get through that fine, other kids are being really chewed up by it. And it's devastating for a lot of students. And I see a lot of those students in our program. So I just was wondering if you could respond to that, Julian, like, is that consistent with your experience as well?
Yeah, like I said, I previously attended Capital High School, and I switched to Avanti for a multitude of reasons. Um, Capital High School's rating system just wasn't very good, and Avanti is more accessible. But I also do believe that bullying and harassment is a big issue. There's a very prominent queer student body at Avanti. In fact, I believe the majority of Avanti High School is queer students. And you have to ask yourself why. Like gay people just aren't magnetically attracted to a school. You know, there's like a reason this happens, and it's because this district does very little on equity, even though they claim that they do a lot. There's so many incidents of student racism, student homophobia, transphobia. A kid walked into Capitol High School. It was either last year or the year before. I forget, because there's so much stuff that has happened at Capitol High School. A student walked in with a huge Confederate flag and was waving around in the morning, blasting music. Like, that is insane to happen here. And apparently a district that's so big on equity and progressive, and this district thinks that they have oh my God. Oh my God. The district, and especially from what I've experienced at Monty High School, think that they have everything figured out because they're the progressive liberal city, and that we recognize our whiteness and stuff like that. And it's just like, no, you don't. It's all performative. It's all just a facade. And eventually they're going to have to reckon with that. They're going to have to reckon with the effects that's going to have. Because right now, it seems the district has no plan for equity. And if they do have a plan, it's not working. Because students are still feeling marginalized in their schools. Black students, minority students, just everybody feels unsafe to the point where people are transferring to alternative schools. You know, same thing. It's like, I, as a Black student, am just appalled at the lack of progress in this city. This city thinks that it has everything figured out. This district thinks it has everything figured out because of this mantra of, oh, we're so progressive, we're Olympia, blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, no, you aren't. You're reformative, and it's all it's a big screen. And eventually it's all going to collapse down, and we're all going to see the effects. We are already seeing the effects. We are already experiencing Black students feeling unsafe at schools. We are experiencing queer students feeling unsafe at schools. We are experiencing students with disabilities feeling unsafe at schools. We are experiencing in the district lower test scores. We are experiencing students having to move schools. That is a very long and stressful process to move schools because of the provocations they're facing from other students because of their queer identity and Black identity and disabled identity. It's ridiculous. And this district actually needs to do something, or this is going to continue, which I'm really worried about, because they aren't being affected by the issues that are happening with students. The district can turn a blind eye because they aren't the ones being directly threatened every day. They aren't being called the hard R. They aren't being called all these different slurs. They aren't being harassed on social media. They aren't doing this, they aren't doing that because they're the district. They're a whole separate entity from these students, and they have no representation for the students. We have two student representatives on the board, and that's kind of like the most that they've done. I'm not dissing those student representatives, they're great people. But when you have two student representatives of a whole school district of students, and you give very little opportunities for the students to give their input, like truly, and for them to process that input, it's just like, well, like students have no choice but to move to alternative schools. There's just it there's like there's nothing else.
Okay, I think this is a good time to just take a minute. I'm just gonna ask to turn off the mics. I'm gonna turn off my mic. I'm gonna set a timer for like 2 minutes on my phone. And at 2 minutes, then I'll bring us back and we'll go to the next topic. I know I'm emotionally worked up right now, so I imagine a few other people are too. So let's just take 2 minutes.
Yeah. Finally on the end, finally getting better. So, yeah. They'll never do it. Yeah, yeah, I was surprised. I think living.
I think the idea about the very I feel like they almost do the same thing to me, like
But whatever, you
like
know.
they'll come into the schools and they'll like motivate and try to speak to me personally as if like I know them or something. Especially, I noticed that a lot during the board meeting when they would just like speak at me, and it's like, first off, I'm not even the only minority student in this room. There are multiple right next to me. It's just. Oh wow.
Yeah.
Are you ready?
Oh my God. Well, I hurt myself and I think that where I did right.
Okay, we're just gonna pull it back together. I'm just gonna give Robin just a moment to talk about SPA for just a second, and then we'll get to our third topic.
Hi, I'm Robin Sowers.
Love you, Robin. With Ruby.
South Salem Progressive Alliance. So I just, for those of you who haven't been to one of our meetings before, I just wanted to introduce who we are. So we're a group of, I'm sorry, I need my cheat sheet. I cannot think with the mic in my hand. So here's what we're about. We're about getting true progressives and socialists elected and involved in local politics. We're about building coalitions with other organizations that may or may not talk to each other and work together. We want to grow voter participation through issue awareness. And we want to work towards creating the kind of community that most of us really want. An equitable community, housing for all, living wage jobs, promoting real safety for transformative justice, protecting the environment, responding to climate change, and all those things that I know we all stand behind here. So if you haven't joined SPA, I'd like to encourage you to continue becoming a member, to consider becoming a member. Consider volunteering with us. We always need more people to help us do all the things that we're doing. If you haven't signed in tonight, there's sign-in sheets around. We really would appreciate knowing who is here. And you can put your contact information there and let us know if you want to volunteer. You can also donate tonight. We're actually not set up to take donations for SPA specifically, but if you wanted to donate something to help pay new positions for the space, that would be much appreciated. So those are all options for you. And I'm just so happy to see the people turning out for this really, really important topic.
We actually are set up to take donation online. Not all the ways we want to, but there's a little bit. There's a way to do it. Yeah.
Not turn away money.
Okay, so one of those things you said is raise awareness around issues, and this public safety tax was sort of stuck on the ballot. And if you've gotten your voters pamphlet, I know I have, and you've looked at the for and against, it's really weird. It just sounds like a couple of kids yelling at each other. It's very bizarre. And the reason is because there was no time given. So I know we have taken a lot of time, and specifically Jeff Sowers is taking a lot of time to do some research into it. And so he's going to kind of kick off that conversation about what's going on with that on the ballot.
All right, thanks, Anthony. My name is Jeff Sowers. I'm a member of the South Salem Progressive Alliance, and have to be here to see everybody. Like Anthony said, I've done some research on the public safety tax. I listened to the presentation from Sheriff Sanders and our Commissioner Carolina Mejia, Thurston County Democrats meeting, read some articles in the newspaper. And I can say that, first of all, I'm really going to recommend that you vote no on the public safety tax, and I get that out there right away. I mean, I think it's a really poor public policy. It's being justified with exaggerations and misinformation. And just overall, I think it's kind of insulting to the memory of George Floyd, the Black Lives Matter protest, and what we went through as a country to try to raise our consciousness about what public safety could look like. And yet here we have almost zero public process and a massive expansion of police as a solution to public safety. So I think just as a general statement, I would say I would recommend voting no, encouraging everybody you know to vote no. I think if we want a real public safety, a decent public safety policy, I think maybe we could get one, but this is not it. I think they need to they need to go back to the drawing board and have a real public process and put together a decent proposal. Just to get into some of the specifics of it. So the first I ever heard about this, and I'm somebody who actually pays attention most of the time. As far as I'm aware, the first anybody who's not in the know on the inside heard about this was in late July, when it was first reported in the Olympian that the commissioners were going to be having this in front of them a week from then, and considering voting this to put it on the ballot, which they then subsequently did about a week later, right, July 27th. They voted to put it on the ballot. This is right in the middle of a primary election. We were all, those of us who are involved in elections, were really up to our eyeballs in election stuff. You know, I heard about it going on, but I didn't have a chance to really look into it too much. I was really busy. They passed it, voted to put it on the ballot. And what I found later, when I actually was like, who's going to write the opposition voter pamphlet statement, this found out they only gave 1 week to allow somebody to write an opposition vote or kept statement. So they really, in a, what I think is a very underhanded, manipulative, and undemocratic fashion, tried to slip this in. When people were, basically people are paying very much attention, trying to take advantage around some of the fear probably happening in our public schools around public safety and some of the concerns about public safety in general. So I just think that there's a really abysmal public process. I think it's easy to imagine what a better public process would be, some public hearings, to start with, where people could come in and share their perspectives on what they thought public safety could look like. What should the priorities be if we're going to do some public safety changes in Thurston County? What is the actual situation going on in Thurston County? I think it would have been a great opportunity to have a conversation and to have some public hearings and draft a more complete, detailed plan about how Thurston County could improve public safety for everybody. But we didn't get that. We got this shortcut. And what they put on the ballot, what they voted to put on the ballot, I actually have the resolution here. I have it with me if anybody's looking at it. It's really quite brief. If you look at it, it's actually not easy to find, track it down, but I just tracked it down. There's basically a lot of whereases, but when you get to the meat of it, there's really not much there. It's a really minimalistic plan. It's a very rough plan, and essentially is allowing so it's going to be split between the counties and the cities. So the basic plan is this: it's going to be split between the counties. Well, I'll go back. Maybe it's just very brief. I'll just read it here. If approved, this proposition would authorize an additional sale and use tax at a rate of 0.2% to be used of the county distribution for up to 75% in law enforcement protection, including hiring additional sheriff deputies and associated infrastructure, and up to 25% for additional prosecution and proportionate public defense services and election security infrastructure. So that's it. So that's it. That's the plan that they're putting in front of voters.
The school resource officer,
Yeah.
Sheriff Sanders was asked if any of that money was gonna go towards school resource officers, which is a public safety issue, if that's what they're trying to address. He said no. So that none of that money is going would be to support that at all. Support, they just, yeah.
Right. So, so I think to me, that's really probably one of the big reasons just to reject this on its face, because of the really poor and frankly manipulative public process that they're trying to use to push this through. Then I think to me another big concern is that when you listen to what Sanders is saying, he frames what's going on as we're having this dire shortage of police officers, that we're understaffed, and that Thurston County, they'll tell you, they've said this repeatedly, Thurston County is 38 out of 39 counties in terms of per capita commissioned officers, which you pointed out probably is not a good measure anyway.
Right.
But even that figure, that's, for one thing, it's just not right. And it's easy to find that out. Actually, they reported in the papers from the Washington Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs. They're the main data source that everybody's looking to get the numbers on the per capita commissioned officers, the number of commissioned officers per 1,000 residents. First of all, it's not true that Thurston County is 38 out of 39. We are lower on the list, but if you look at the list, all the bigger counties are lower. So the bigger, the over 100,000 population counties all have very comparable rates to Thurston County. So all the big counties do have a lower rate than the smaller counties, but I think that's pretty obviously a function of just what you need and versus
Mathematics.
a bigger population. So just to give you the numbers, Thurston County has 0.63 commissioned officers per 1,000 residents. That's the unincorporated part of the county, about 150,000 people in Thurston County. That's higher than Pierce County, which has 0.57. It's higher than Clark County, it's higher than Island County. So Thurston County is actually right about in the center of the bigger counties. Clark County is 0.53, Pierce County is 0.57. Thurston County is 0.63, Kitsap County is 0.67, King County is 0.69. So they're all in the same basic ballpark. So to claim that Thurston County is having this dire shortage relative to other counties is just frankly, well, for one thing, it's not 38 out of 39, so that's just flat out wrong. And then it's just hyperbole, an exaggeration to claim that Thurston County is having this dire shortage. And then at the same time that they're saying that they have this dire shortage, oh, and he'll say, oh, Carolina Mejia, he said they're doing the presentation. Carolina Mejia drove around with me and she saw that we didn't have enough staff or deputies to meet all these calls we were getting. But then a few sentences later, he acknowledges, well, we've only actually staffed, we have 59 currently funded deputy positions, 59 currently funded by the current county budget, 59. Well, they've only hired 37 of those. So there's a huge shortage of funded positions that they haven't managed to, they haven't filled, they haven't managed to hire for. Now, why that is and what's going on, it's another discussion. But obviously you would think that that would be the first explanation for why maybe you're being understaffed. You can't even hire the positions you're funded for. So that to me is the most obvious explanation for the challenge that they're having with the lack of officers for the available calls that they're getting. I would think that their priority would be to get fully staffed to see how they do, and then go from there. Another thing Sanders will claim in his presentation is that he's going to use some of this money for mental health resources. And he wants a helicopter, at least one. I'm not sure how much that's going to cost. They didn't say exactly how much the helicopter was going to cost. And exactly why they needed it. I don't know, maybe a drone would work. They're a lot cheaper. But, so there's some sort of a vague bundle of stuff he throws in there. But he emphasizes, we're going to do mental health and crisis response. That's part of the plan. Well, first of all, it wasn't in the resolution that was passed. So he's not held to that, and so there's nothing required to do anything for mental health whatsoever. The only thing that's required in the resolution, the primary purpose of the resolution as stated, is to hire more police officers, which he says he wants to hire quite a few more police officers. It's going to 32 additional, 32. That's a lot. And we currently have 59 currently funded. It's a massive expansion of our local police. I think you don't realize what a shocking, unprecedented, and massive expansion of our local police that this represents. And
then more prosecutors.
Yeah, and that would put us far above the norm in terms of the other large counties, in terms of our per capita police rate. So I think we really need to grapple with the magnitude of the armed deputy expansion in this proposal, and whether we're really going to get any kind of other provisions in there that we all know is what we would need in a more balanced public safety policy, like more mental health responders, people who can respond, and not necessarily situations where you need armed officers, crisis response teams, and that sort of thing. It would be really, really great, I think, to see a detailed proposal to see how much is going to go to each issue. Yeah.
Did anybody look at how full is a Thurston County prison? Did you look at
I did not. I mean, I've looked at that, but I don't have those
Kind of,
numbers off the
you know,
top of my head. Yeah.
those with, but yeah.
I have a question. Can SPA, respond to Sheriff Sanders and ask him some questions? I'm a direct service provider I work in home services, I, advocate for tenants, and I work with folks, with mental health disorder. And what's stopping them now from doing that? If they have 59 positions, 38, so that would do the math, that's what, 21 openings, right?
Right.
21 opens, deputy positions. Why not use that funding for mental health? Now, what's stopping them from addressing the mental health portion of it and the substance abuse and other things? So, I think that SPA could ask them. And during this process, we're gonna vote, and again, people are responding out of fear. Say, oh, we need more police officers, you can't vote. What? They're not answers.
Good point.
Yeah,
Good
point.
point. No, I was just gonna say, property taxes have gone up crazy in Thurston County. So where's that money going? Why do they need to have this extra income here? When, like, I know myself, in the last 5 years, our property taxes have doubled because of houses are going up in value. So even if you don't sell your house, yours goes up in value and they charge you for it. So if the county's getting all this extra money, where's it going?
Yeah, it's a good question.
I would also like to mention.
Yeah, go ahead.
So as we were speaking about the vacant cop positions, it certainly something in my mind, that this is a trend among multiple police departments, including the Seattle Police Departments. There has been a lot of organizing in Seattle in these past few years because the Seattle Police Department had $28.4 million allocated for 200 vacant positions that they had no plan to fill at all. So these vacant positions are giving money to the police departments and sheriff departments, and they know that. And I'm not saying Sheriff Sanders is like doing the same thing the Seattle Police Department does, but it does beg the question, where is this money going for these vacant positions? And I think Sheriff Sanders should definitely be pressed to address that.
That's a good point. Yeah. And so, and then just the last observation I'd like to make is just on Sheriff Sanders. I think, he's just the sheriff-elect still. No, he just was recently elected. So he's the new sheriff. He was supported by the local Democrats because he was seen as better than our previous sheriff. But I think since he's been in office, it's been concerning what his agenda is really all about. Just recently on social media, he's publicly criticized the judge for releasing a prisoner, supporting that narrative that basically we're being too soft on crime. He's criticized the police pursuit law. He showed up at a school board meeting when they're discussing SROs dressed in uniform, clearly there to lend his support to the SRO position. So I think it's concerning myself the degree to which our sheriff is really promoting or pushing this pro-police expansionist, pro-get tough on crime conservative narrative in our county. And I can say that if I talked to him personally, he acknowledged to me that twice he did vote for Donald Trump and he voted for Colt for governor. So I think, we have now this concern that he may be part of this constitutionalist movement. I think we may have a real problem on our hands with our sheriff, to be honest with you. I think it's something we need to be thinking about, how we, what we're going to need to do with regard to our sheriff. It's looking increasingly like to me we have a big problem with our local sheriff. And what I would consider to be more modern thinking public safety approaches. So that's what I got, and please put it back over to Anthony.
Jillian for sure. Does anyone else have any other
That's
comments?
it, that's the commissioner for sheriff. I would love to hear from Leslie about crisis response, and their lack of response to the degree. Yeah.
So, I'm a friend of the family and close to his mother. And I've been working with her on this case. So he was killed August 22nd, 2022. And we still have not heard from the Thurston County prosecutor about whether they're bringing any criminal charges. And what unfolded that day, so that's a year and 3 months now.
Yeah,
2 months?
oh, yeah.
And actually, I just got a text from Millie, and she sent me a picture of her son's name on some up by the grocery outlet. She liked it. It's been spray painted.
Oh, yeah.
Green, so she likes seeing that. She needs all the support we can give her. Her family has filed a civil claim against the city of Olympia for $21 million. So the civil claim is different than criminal charges. It's actually a lower standard of proof and then the criminal side. And the behavior of the police that day is really gonna be under the microscope in that civil claim. They failed to call the crisis response unit because they thought it was too dangerous. What is the crisis response unit for? We know that people with untreated mental health issues were 16 times more likely to be killed by police. So by not calling the crisis response unit, so the dispatchers didn't even call. So we're really looking hard at the dispatch training that they're getting and whether they do that the CRU, who makes that decision to make that call. It sounds negligent to us that the crisis response unit was not called. They did not use all their less lethal equipment. They left some of their equipment in the trunk. When the officer who was in charge of that equipment, the supervisor, went to retrieve it, that's when Tim was shot. So the supervisor left the scene, and to get this less lethal equipment was a launcher that shoots a big foam ball instead of a bullet. And so they didn't use that. They tased him twice, but the tasers failed. And they didn't use their pepper spray on him or other sort of devices. They didn't retreat. They actually escalated instead of de-escalated. So
They chased him down.
they chased him down. We have looked at the videos many times. On the 22nd of each month, we're going to be placing flowers at the location where he was killed. And so please participate. If you know where that is, it's the Starbucks drive-in in the Hobby Lobby area. So you'll see flowers and a sign there on the 22nd of each month. So yeah, 22nd is gonna be fun. That's an anniversary of the day. We're trying to keep this in the public's awareness. So it's gonna be October 22nd, November 22nd, any time of the day. And you'll see a sign, that's the place where he was killed. It's close to the dumpsters down there, the driveway.
Not in traffic, like I said.
Not in traffic, no. It is discouraging to the family that they haven't heard from the city.
That's what they do, they drag it out.
They drag it out, and I actually wrote that. So the Thurston County prosecutor has asked the Clark County prosecutor to look at the police investigation. And the Clark County, I wrote you. And I said, what's going on? We haven't heard, what can you tell me about the plan to make a decision on this?
We should do action.
It's pretty goofy. It's very disrespectful to the family. They weren't allowed to see his body for weeks. And at the end of that time period, the mom said, I don't want to see it. It's ridiculous. That is no longer my son. And, right. So the whole thing is tragic. And, but we're talking about the mental health response and the crisis response unit. Our expectations and the law's expectations are much different. I think the city is going to they've made no changes in policy. They've done no internal analysis. They're waiting for this criminal prosecution. The law doesn't require them to wait for this charging decision or no charging decision, whatever the decision. The law does not require that. They can do their internal review. They can look at their policies. They can say what happened that day, but they're waiting. And that is a decision that's on them. The law does not require that.
I think we should put that video on the SPA website. But Jeff, to your point of what can we do about the sheriff? You do not have to be a commissioned police officer to be sheriff. I'll tell you that now. Anybody can run to be sheriff. You will have to, I think, within a year, go through the academy. But I know, I think it's the sheriff in New Jersey doesn't even carry a weapon. Yeah, and a black woman. Anyway, yeah, anybody can run to be sheriff. And so why not begin to work with somebody who's interested in reforming or, and just changing, rebranding the the sheriff. And then, yeah, so.
We've actually written some draft legislation that requires them to be certified. So as a condition of filing for the office, and we're working with some legislators on that. So it's a big deal.
Oh, yeah.
Because it means any of their misconduct can't take away their, they have no license to take away, no endorsement to take away. So any amount of misconduct, it will not,
That's why they're allowed to go from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. They get fired in one, they go to the next one, currently.
So Leslie, I actually have a question for you. So if Thurston County was to frame more, what I would say balance and enlightened public safety policies, let's say we were gonna pass a new tax. I mean, maybe we don't need to pass a new tax. Maybe we just need to use the money differently than we have. Let's say that we were. What would a more enlightened public safety policy look like in terms of kind of a proposal? What elements do you think it should contain?
It's a great question, and I don't have something off the top of my head for this, but a lot less police response for public safety issues. So if you're when the school board is thinking of spending money on a police officer, that's money that's not being spent on other. So a different sort of budgeting response for who can respond, a different acknowledgement of what public safety is, working on, we know about housing issues, we know about, issues with access to income, guaranteed basic income issues come up, as a good response. So those are uses of money that, increase people's sense of security and well-being and mental health. If you look at what the city of Olympia, the Reimagining Public Safety Committee recommended, they recommended a host of tactics and strategies for public safety that the city is not pursuing. So they spent a long time with a great team of committee members, and the city has shelved that, and they are moving on to their next new idea, which is oversight. But they don't want oversight with any teeth in it. So
Nobody with lived experience.
nobody with lived experience and no real accountability. So that's a good question, Jeff. And I think it is reducing the role of police in responding to urgent needs of people and looking at violent crimes against persons, rethinking how they're responding to crimes against property, and those are.
Even housing vouchers with the money, and that could be in there, that they would provide permanent, housing vouchers for folks in a community, to help with the homeless crisis. And, the rent prices are going, well, there's no, rent stabilization. So there are a lot of things they do with that money, to mitigate the reasons why a lot of people are in crisis in the first place.
Leslie, are there any statistics out of Tacoma, because they initiated that program to do a basic monthly income?
Then, yeah, they did a guaranteed basic income program. I think they had good results. They have something on their website, I think. What we're all watching in Tacoma right now is the trial of the three police who killed him. So Collins, Burbank, and Rankin. That is a big deal right now. Yeah. And we're watching big screen data. Yeah. But I think, so I don't have access to that information, but Tacoma does have it online.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else, comments, questions?
I have a question. I don't want to myself. I was looking on the public disclosure website, like the campaign stuff. And I'm not very experienced with that website, so I might need something explained to me. But from what I could tell, the Proposition 1 looks like it's all set up and funded by the sheriff and members of the sheriff's department and the Thurston County Sheriff's Deputies Association. And I just thought that was, because this tax is essentially giving that department money for him to allocate it as he needs for the police services that he says he needs it for. So it seems like there's a conflict of interest. If he's making this proposition and it's funded by himself and his deputies, and then if the proposition passes and they get all this funding, they're going to be allocating it exactly how they want it. They're gonna get a good investment on their money that they, for this petition. I don't know how to find out more about that. I'd like to, because I'm not happy at all with the sheriff. He's a bully and he's a fear monger. And Thurston County Democrats was really disappointed in their statement about him, because it was like it was written for him, and then the rest of it was just like 4 paragraphs of like kicking his butt and saying what they think is good about him. And it's ridiculous. Like, you need to call this out. If they're not going to be voices for the people and the betterment of the people, then their voice should not be as loud as it is. But if somebody could like direct me where to find out more info about the funding of that petition, like when it goes to,
When the money comes in, you mean, when they collect the taxes, if it goes through?
yeah, so if it goes through and they collect the taxes and it says that the sheriff's department is getting 75%, like, is he gonna allocate that for all these convenient overtime hours for all these people that invested in this,
Invest in right-wing political campaigns?
right?
Right, well, he's only bound by the parameters of this resolution, which says that 75% is for law enforcement protection, including hiring additional sheriff deputies. That's it. That's all it says.
But that would all be under his discretion.
That would
as the
all be
sheriff.
under his discretion. That's right.
And there's
So-
already money for those additional.
Right, there's already funding for 59 positions, and they currently only have 37 positions to fill. So,
So he's
yeah.
asking for more
Overtime hours
positions
is
he
about-
can't fill.
Is there,
Right.
is there an
Right.
interest at like the level of the proposition or the legislation? Is there anything that like would deem that a conflict of interest with them all being invested in the funding of this?
Well, I think that's a
People
really
would-
good point, but,
And that
yeah.
the people could deem it a conflict of interest
Right.
and be activated about it. I think it's a great point and valid. Because there's no evidence they need that much money, and we should be defunding. We should, and putting money elsewhere.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's,
yeah,
I
I mean,
think, very good point position, and let's get activated.
well, good job for you for bringing that up. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, going to the PDC, it's a good thing to do.
I
But
wish
you-
I had more info about it, but like it was something I just looked into this morning.
But even elected officials, public employees, they're all able to donate to campaigns, subject to the campaign finance limit of,
Where they collect for profits from that and then distribute it to themselves.
well, it's only for the campaign though, so anything reported on the PDC that's just for to support the referendum. The
Right, but if
proposition
it
that's on the ballot.
passes-
Yeah, then if it passes, of course, then they get the tax money, the sheriff will then be able to allocate that how he sees fit. Based on his own discretion, I mean, it gives him complete authority in this resolution to, within that very rough, vague parameter that I read out, to do essentially whatever he wants. Yeah, very little oversight of it, which is obviously a huge weakness. We'd be nice to have a detailed plan about exactly what that money's gonna be used for, but we really don't know. Yeah,
I'm sure Turnheim's office is getting 25%
Oh, of
of
course
that
he
money.
is.
oh, right.
The sheriff and the coroner's office probably too, because they're all in the training position.
Right, and another thing to keep in mind is that the county gets 60%. The cities get, based on their population, portion and share of the remaining 40%. And nothing has been said about what they're gonna do with their 40%. We haven't heard a peep from any of them that I've heard about what they're gonna do with that money. So big, almost half of it was just a big like question mark about what it's gonna be used for. So the degree of uncertainty, we're voting what is quite a substantial tax, a regressive tax, by the way. It's another, I mean, it's a sales tax, so it's actually gonna be paid predominantly by lower income people. So it's primarily, it's a regressive tax. We don't have any idea what the 40% is gonna be used for at all. There's been nothing even said about it. And even the part that they have said is really vague, so.
And can you explain that again? So the county will get 60% of the money, and then the sheriff, who's already part of the county, gets 75% of that 60%
No, they get 75%
of the whole thing.
of the 60%.
So yeah.
Yeah, right. That's right.
So when you say the town, is that city of
Yeah,
Olympia?
the city of Olympia, the city of Lacey, the city of Tumwater,
You know, any
yeah,
town?
any incorporated city. So the county share is supposed to be for their, the unincorporated part of the county.
That's a lot, that's 50%.
Right, so the incorporated cities will get their proportionate share of that other 40%.
Portion on their population.
Based on their population, right, so they'll divide up that remaining 40%.
And no provisions on what's that.
Yeah, but that's just a
used
blank
for.
check,
They
so
can
they're
use it
just
for
gonna,
anything.
yeah, they're just gonna get it, I mean, supposedly it's for public safety, but whatever that means, so they're just essentially getting a big tax increase, blank check. Voters don't even know what they're really voting for.
The prosecutor thing is troubling too, because like, Leslie said, the prosecutor sent Timothy Green's case to another prosecutor. What do we elect him for? But he's already stated he doesn't investigate police officers. John Schunheim will not. So rather than do that, he sent it to Clark County. So we're paying them to do his work that we elected him to do, as prosecutor. So they don't even want to prosecute.
Yeah.
They don't even.
So,
No, we need to prosecute.
Yeah, we had the fire safety thing that was on the ballot. We voted that down because the plan didn't make any sense. So their new tactic, the police department, is just not give us any plan.
right, right, yeah, we had a really neat, yeah,
Hope we won't do anything about that.
right, and they had more of a public process. So they actually had a public process, they had a plan, and then it failed. So I think they learned that, let's skip the public process, let's shortcut the plan, and maybe we can get it through that way. So it seems like, that's more or less what they're doing, and
It's
I would-
predatory though, because they're
Yeah.
targeting also those parents that are in fear for the school district, who some parents are legitimately fearful
Yeah.
for their children. And to me, it's predatory because they're off that fear. You have the sheriff show up to a school board meeting to, pacify these parents and then endorse one of those parents who's part of this group of people who are all these bad, who are advocating for the wrong things, who are harassing people, doxing people, and all these things. And now he endorses that candidate. It's all so he can get his proposition passed. It's so predatory. This really doesn't care about those people either. If you're watching anybody from that group, no, he doesn't care about you either necessarily, because it's predatory. You're feeding into people's fear and you're manipulating them into thinking, because none of this is going to SROs. He said that in the Thursday County Democrat meeting, or to support the program, any student safety program, none of it would go to that. So, he's not really going to do anything about their fear at the end of the day. But he wants those votes so he can get that proposition passed. Yes, I said it. You harassed me already, so I think you harassed me.
Hey, I just had a question for, then maybe go to Stephanie. So when you said that there's a statement from the Thurston County Democrats, were you talking about their endorsement of Sanders? Before the last year's election? Is that a recent thing? I'm just kind of curious.
I was referring to the recent statement, but I mean, I don't have anything to say right now.
Because that
And
was,
it's good light of Thurston County Democrats, but that statement was really stomach turning.
yeah, just because I'm the former chair of the Thurston County Democrats up until this last year, and then our current chair is Cade Walker, who thank you, Cade, for being here today. So I think very interested in that perspective, and thank you
I'm
for
really
sharing that.
disappointed in that statement. And I really hope that like you will see something that you haven't seen and do better. Because we need your voice like in a positive way, I mean, it's not okay.
Yeah, and I guess I'm not personally clear on what statement she's referring to.
I think it was clamoring for a written statement from Sanders. He asked if I would post a statement to make regarding his withdrawal of his endorsement from Frank Roster.
Okay,
So I posted that and had his official information.
okay.
But it was
Okay,
on your personal page, on the TCD page? Okay, it was on the TCD page.
I love this engagement, and I think, again, I want to thank you for saying something and, reading, and not that other people don't see this stuff and don't bring it up either. So whoever does engage like that, it's important.
Yeah.
It's really important, and it's important to counter that narrative too, because the right side, I don't care what side it is, any side that is supportive of people being harmed and excluded is the wrong side. We should be supportive of all people and get in the habit of protecting everybody. And so, and to me, that's what is happening with those groups. When you're excluding people, you are harming people. When you are, don't approve of somebody because of an identity, that is harming people. So, yeah, we need to counter that narrative, and yeah, I just got inspired, and I'm gonna do a video in response to what you're saying, because it's not okay, and we need to be louder than them.
I would also like to give some wait. Apologies. I would also like to give some quick input. The Thurston County Democrats, I was extremely disappointed with the fact that Sheriff Sanders did not even get press to give his own personal, statement on this, and instead was just propped up by the local Democrats. I think it was really gross, and I think that the sheriff should definitely be held more accountable if he is an elected official who can't even make a statement himself on something like a school board candidate that they endorse. Like, that is ridiculous. What if something bigger happened and this man is too nervous to release a statement by himself? That's almost embarrassing to the county. And it just confuses me like very, very heavily, because I understand that like the nuances behind this and how Sheriff Sanders only being supported because they're the better option of the alternative. But still, there should be some sort of accountability held to Sheriff Sanders to use his own tongue. Like, I feel like that is a very small ask to have. Most recently, with the leftist student union, the Teen Thurston County Democrats reached out to us, and we said an absolute no because of the Sheriff Sanders stuff. We said, we will not work with you because of the Sheriff Sanders stuff. It is absolutely abhorrent. And I don't understand why he wasn't pressed to give his own speech. I don't understand why this help was given, because he doesn't deserve it. He should be able to speak for his own actions. And I think he should be given his own statement. And I just don't understand the thought process behind it, honestly. I think, like I said, it was pretty gross, but yeah.
Part of the presentation.
So several have mentioned, the fear mongering, the instilling fear in people. One of the things I've been flagging over the past week is, Sheriff Sanders' use of social media to do just that. And what I see happening is that he's really using, social media, to create fear about safety in this community by posting selfies from various crime scenes. I've seen him posting, despite being the domestic violence, sheriff that's gonna protect everyone from that domestic violence, posting, street names and pictures from neighborhoods where they're on DV calls. Anybody who's experienced DV knows that victims rarely keep their abusers in a return home, and nothing is gonna incite an abuser like seeing pictures of their neighborhood on social media.
Right.
We see, pictures of,
Cars.
busts that they've done cars, but it's all meant to instill fear. And then, these posts about, oh, but we don't have enough deputies to cover all of this crime. Additionally, I see a lot of really awful comments in the Thurston County Scanner Facebook page where he says, really awful things about people who struggle with addiction, people with mental health issues, people who are houseless, that do not reflect the values of this community, despite what he may say. And I spoke out on this. I've been watching it for a while, but I spoke out on it centered on youth because of the SRO conversation. That's where I use my voice in this community. And I was retaliated against this.
Oh, yeah.
Big time on a post that the sheriff made, paraphrasing something that I said. We paraphrased it, said onward, with an American flag emoji on it. And it's had over 2,000 likes in a week where I was doxxed this week.
Oh, yeah.
But that's okay. I'm a white woman. I have a lot of privilege. I also want to say that every time Julian speaks at anything, they are blasted all over social media. The school board allowed a woman named Candy Mercer to record Julian at the school board meeting. So many of us in this room can use our privilege very easily to speak out, and maybe it's a little scary sometimes. You got to think about it. Students like Julian and community members and school board members like Tawana speak out with great risk. And so my challenge to everybody in this room and anybody who may be watching online is that we all need to get engaged in this conversation about Sheriff Sanders, and we need to use that privilege.
I feel like maybe that's the right place to wrap up. The big takeaway from that topic that we don't want you to forget, no matter what spread, is vote no on that thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so make sure that.
Encourage everyone you know to vote no.
Encourage everyone you know to vote no. And then we've got an entire other list of things that have come up that we also need to pay attention to.
Maybe we could just briefly mention, we do have some people running for office. I mean, there are, what we're talking about here are really policies that are being made by the people who are elected to represent us. And ultimately, if we want better policies, we need to elect different people. And so I think we got some great people running for public office. Kavanna Reed running for Olympia School Board. So, we're really concerned about public safety. She's the candidate, I think, to represent us. And I know she's an amazing person. She gets into the details. She understands, she delves into those policy details. She pulls it out into the light. She makes sure that we understand what's going on in a way that I've never seen a school board candidate do. So she's incredible. There's Jess, who is not here today, Jess Turlot Colombo. She's also running for Olympia School Board.
Against Frank DeRocher.
Against Frank DeRocher, right? So she's one, of course, we all really want to vote for.
Yes.
Encourage everyone we know to vote for her. That could be a close race. So please vote for Jess. And we have this Emily Klaus is running for Thurston County Commissioner. We live in a very more progressive county than I think people realize. And Emily Klaus is coming from District 5, which is Lacey. It's not even Olympia, right? Nobody really thinks that Lacey is that progressive. Look, she's a young woman, in her late 20s, colored hair, nose ring. I honestly was even a little worried about the nose ring. I told her, maybe she can have the nose ring. I know it's a bad choice. She put me back. She put me in my place. I didn't say anything after that. So anyway, I just want to, please, we need Emily on on our Thurston County Commission. She was took a position against the public safety tax, the only one that did. So anyway, I think having somebody like Emily on our Thurston County Commission would be awesome. Of course, we have Sarah Tong, who's with us today, running for Port of Olympia. So, very incredible person, heart of gold, gonna really fight for the environment, fight for social equity on the Port Commission with high-speed internet, lower cost high-speed internet, which is something the port can do, the port should do. And she is gonna bring ideas like that to our port. So really encourage you to vote for Sarah Tong. For
And
Port
I
of
will say,
Olympia.
I'll be speaking out about this public safety tax at every opportunity.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
So, and get involved in these elections, get involved in Thurston County Democrats. I would say that, I was chair of Thurston County Democrats for 2 years. And one of the things I really love about the local Democrats is it's a super democratic organization. It really is. You join, you get a vote. You can make a motion at any meeting. You can make a motion. You can put your issues on the agenda. It really is run by the members and the locally elected precinct committee officers that run the Thurston County Democrats. The chair is really, he's a spokesperson, has influence, but he's really at the meeting mostly a facilitator. And so the members really control ultimately the process. So, and we're the members, really, it's the people. It's $25 to become a member. If you run as a PCO, I encourage people to consider running as precinct committee officers. Many precincts are vacant. I'm a precinct committee officer. Mike is a precinct committee officer. Sarah's there's a lot of precinct committee officers here.
190 vacancies.
Yeah, we have a huge number of vacancies. The way we're really going to change this is to get involved. And it's going to take a movement, right? It takes all those people working together. Bob's trying to facilitate making that movement happen. So I really encourage people to get involved. Get involved with Thurston County Democrats. Get involved with SPA. Get involved with these campaigns. Be more assertive about pushing these issues forward into the public consciousness. And that's how we're going to make the change that we really need. And then we're going to make it happen.
Maggie Sanders.
And Maggie Sanders. Yes, she's not here. Maggie Sanders for Port of Olympia is also a really awesome candidate. If Maggie and Sarah get elected, it's going to change the Port of Olympia in a major and historic way. That would be really cool.
Especially if we can get elected along with Jasmine.
Along with Jasmine.
3 out of 5.
Yeah, Jasmine too. Jasmine and Magdalena. I'd recommend her as well. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
I'd like to make an announcement.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about Sarah and Maggie and Jasmine. For those of you who want to know a little more about the port, it's a really important issue to come and learn about the port, what the port's doing and how it can really benefit us all. We're all paying taxes to the port, $7.5 million a year. They can do so much more for us than they're doing. So there's a little public program coming up next Saturday, free at the Tumwater Library, and I'll put these flyers out in Fly Talk. So you'll get to learn a lot about how the port has changed over the last 100 years and the issues about the port. You get to learn all about Canada. Thank you.
I'll give some quick closing comments. Like I said at the beginning, I am founder of College OSD. We're a student anarchist organization organizing for the Olympia School District. We focus on education into getting kids into organizing and politics and leftism. We really do need support. We have great support right now with our friends and our parent allies, but all that we can get, because we also help out the Olympia Student Union. I co-run it alongside Davis and of course all of our other amazing members. And we really do need a lot of support because the district loves to push back, and they push back pretty hard. The Student Union recently had to move out of the Amonte High School building because our principal was getting no, not even pushback. Our advisor was telling the principal about what we were saying at the student union meeting, and at a point, the principal came to a student when they were trying to get their homecoming guest pass signed and said, I'm not going to sign this for you because of what you were saying. And at the end of that conversation, he did end up signing it. But that was an absolute disgusting, like, no. Like, first time, we're out of the building, currently removed to the parking lot across the street. It's pretty disgusting, and I kind of hate the fact that I keep on having to cut relationships with the adults in my life, especially those who are involved in the OSD, because either they're going to get pressured by the OSD or they are the pressurers. And it really sucks. So as much support as we can get, we are hoping to start having like monthly meetings soon for Abolish OSD that will also involve different posts. Yeah. So yeah, just support us. We're on Instagram. Read our zines, even if you're not anarchists. Still very good to know. We have some good information, especially about the school districts and more into the incidents at Capital High School in our first couple of weeks. So thank you. Follow OSD on Instagram. We don't have any social media currently, but yeah, also love to see you on Instagram. Yeah, thank you.
So just one more big thank you, and we're gonna be out of here. Can we end with a round of applause for our panelists?